The way Dominic Cummings is saying about these words, and the Prime Minister's spokesman says Boris Johnson has fully confident in Health Secretary Matt Hancock's, and you're going to be watching a video that Dominic Cummings talks about. He talks about thousands of people are going to die in the UK. Does that mean there's going to be a war in the UK? You will listen to the words, the wisdoms, what will be said. Some people don't like war, some people don't want to hear about it. But the way Dominic Cummings speaks about it, you'll see. So there's a lady here talking about it here. And you'll see the words that Dominic Cummings says. You girls and guys and ladies and gentlemen, make your own decision what you think about this.
Then Mr. Johnson initially dismissed COVID as a scare story. He described the government as lions led by donkeys.
Scare story
and said Health Secretary Matt Hancock
of COVID
should have been
virus.
sacked. But he also admitted he'd made mistakes and began with an apology.
The truth is that senior ministers, senior officials, senior advisors like me fell disastrously short of the standards that the public has a right to expect of its government in a crisis like this. When the public needed us most, the government failed. And I'd like to say to all the families of those who died unnecessarily, how sorry I am for the mistakes that were made and for my own mistakes at that.
He went on to describe reassurances he'd received about pandemic preparation at the beginning of the crisis from the Health Secretary Matt Hancock.
25th of January, I spoke to Private Office, and 25th of January, I said to the Secretary of State, I actually...
When you said, was that a conversation, or was that a memo, or a text?
So I've got the exact words of a text that I
Dominic
sent
Cummings,
to him.
yeah.
I think I spoke to him that day, possibly the next day.
Criminals, distful behaviour by threatening with NHS test and trace.
Investigated preparations for something terrible like Ebola or a flu pandemic. Please ensure we take a risk-averse approach to funding preparations in the SR. SR's abbreviation for spending review. I'm going to dig into this plus bioterror, to which Hancock replied, we've got full plans up to and including pandemic levels, regularly prepped and refreshed, CMOs and epidemiologists, with stress testing. Now, it's our top tier risk register. We had an SR bit before this. Me, I replied, great. I'm reading about the CDC and preparations for a flu pandemic. It's very worrying.
Right.
So
the 25th of January, you instigated a set of inquiries within the system. Would you?
Yes.
Would you
However,
be able to...
I'd like to stress, though, that I'd like to stress and apologise for the fact that it is true that I did this, but I did not follow up on this and push it the way that I should have done.
By March 2020, though, things were so bad, a senior civil servant felt obliged to speak frankly.
The second most powerful official in the country, Helen McNamara, is the Deputy Cabinet Secretary. She walked into the office while we're looking at this whiteboard. She says, I've just been talking to the official, Mark Sweeney, who is in charge of coordinating with the Department for Health. He said, quote, I've been told for years that there is a whole plan for this. There is no plan. We're in huge trouble. I've come through here to the, Helen McNamara said, I've come through here to the Prime Minister's office to tell you all, quote, I think we are absolutely I think this country's heading for a disaster. I think we're going to kill thousands of people. As soon as I've been told this, I've come through to see you. It seems from the conversation that you're having that that's correct. And I said, I think you're right. I think it is a disaster.
Well, throughout the session, Mr. Cummings was particularly scathing about the performance of the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock.
The Secretary of State for Health should have been fired for at least 15, 20 things, including lying to everybody in multiple occasions, in meeting after meeting, in the cabinet room and publicly. I said repeatedly to the Prime Minister that he should be fired. So did the Cabinet Secretary, so did many other senior people. There are numerous examples. I mean, in the summer, he said that everyone who needed treatment, who got the treatment that they required. He knew that that was a lie, because he'd been briefed by the Chief Scientific Advisor and the Chief Medical Officer himself about the first peak, and we were told explicitly people did not get the treatment that they deserved. Many people were left to die in horrific circumstances. just before the Prime Minister and I were diagnosed with having COVID ourselves, the Secretary of State for Health told us in the Cabinet room, everything is fine on PPE. We've got it all covered, etc., etc. When I came back, almost the first meeting I had in the Cabinet room was about the disaster over PPE and how we were actually completely sure that hospitals all over the country were running out. Secretary of State said in that meeting, this is the fault of Simon Stevens, it's the fault of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, it's not my fault, they've blocked approvals on all sorts of things. I said to the Cabinet Secretary, please investigate this and find out if it's true. The Cabinet Secretary came back to me and said, it's completely untrue. I have lost confidence in the Secretary of State's honesty in these meetings.
Mr. Cummings also gave a new reason for his trip to Durham last year. He said security threats to his family had forced the move, but that leaving this information out of his Rose Garden explanation had been a huge mistake.
On the 28th of February, when I was dealing with the COVID problem, on the Friday night, I was down in Westminster, and my wife called saying there's a gang of people outside saying they're going to break into the house and kill everybody inside. She was alone at the house at the time with our then 3-year-old. On the 22nd of March, the story happened, which the lady mentioned earlier, about that fake quote from me, basically implying that I was happy for everyone to die, which led to further problems. After that weekend, I then said to my wife, right, we've been discussing it for a month. We've got to get out of here on Friday. So before the whole thing happened, with the Prime Minister being sick, my wife calling up on the Friday and everything else, it had already been decided that I was going to move my family out of London, regardless of the COVID rules. We had a kind of chaotic situation in Number 10 where the Prime Minister said, we're going to have to do something, you're going to have to explain something. And I said, I'm not explaining these security things, otherwise I'm going to have everyone mobbed back outside my house. So I ended up giving the whole Rose Garden thing, where what I said was true, but we left out a kind of crucial part of it all. And it just, the whole thing was a complete disaster. And the truth is, and then it undermined public confidence in the whole thing.
Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig.
Well,
who is in
that's
Westminster.
Dominic
6 hours
Cummings
of evidence
speaking.
so far, John.
I mean, is he talking about what happened way back for the pandemic? Will war happen? Will something else happen? Who knows? And this is just putting his point across like everybody else. Anyway, thank you for joining me, guys, girls, ladies and gentlemen. See you next video, peace.